They used to say the book didn't merely contain a secret. It was the secret. I didn't believe that at first. When you grow up in a small mountain town, mine tucked between ridges of old Appalachian stone, you hear plenty of tales that bend toward the dramatic. Folks there like their mysteries the way they like their whiskey, strong enough to make you cough and warm enough to keep you coming back. So when the rumors about the forbidden book first slipped into my ears as a kid, I shrugged them off as campfire fuel. But years passed, and the whispers stayed. By the time I was a grown man, with more doubts than certainties and a mind shaped by both scripture and skepticism, I found myself hearing the tale again, this time from a voice too steady to dismiss. If you enjoy stories like this, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel Prophet's Lens. It truly motivates me to create even more interesting stories for you. And please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'm honestly very curious to see how far these stories travel. Thank you all for your understanding and support. It began with a letter. I received it one quiet November morning. The envelope bore no return address, only my name handwritten in an unfamiliar script, sharp, angular, as though the writer hadn't used a pen in years. Inside was a single piece of parchment paper, actual parchment, the kind that felt like dried skin when you brushed your fingers across it. On it were 5 words. The book is waking again. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Just those 5 words, unsettling as a whisper behind the ear. I remember staring at that letter longer than I care to admit. The logical part of me, the part raised to analyze, to question, to never leap before checking the ground, told me someone was pulling a prank. Probably a student of mine from the community Bible study I taught on weekends. But there was something different about that parchment. Something too old, too confident. I folded the letter, slid it into my jacket pocket, and tried to ignore the tug of unease curling at the base of my spine. 2 days later, my old friend Daniel called. We hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years, not since he'd moved overseas for archaeological work. He was one of those brilliant minds that seem to live half in this world, half in another. He'd always had a strange fascination with apocryphal writings, scrolls, codices, fragments of forgotten traditions. But when I answered the phone, his usual calm tone was nowhere to be found. "Elias," he said, breathless. "Tell me you got the letter." I froze. "What letter?" "The warning," he whispered. "The book. Please. Tell me you received it." I had to sit down. "Daniel, what is happening?" What followed was a scatter of words, fragments about a discovery in an abandoned monastery in Cyprus, a manuscript sealed inside a lead container, a string of disappearances, and something he called the Chamber of Names. But what stuck with me, what rooted itself into my chest, was the tremor in his voice when he said, "They told us the book couldn't be opened. Not by human hands. Not without consequence." That was the moment my curiosity overcame my doubt. "Where are you?" I asked. There was a pause. Then a low, almost reverent whisper. "You won't believe me. Try me." "I'm in the mountains," he said. "Back near your town." My stomach tightened. "What? Why?" "Because," he replied, "the book chose its next keeper. And he lives near you." Before I could ask another question, the call cut off. The silence afterward felt too sharp, like the world had taken a breath it couldn't release. I didn't sleep that night. I kept turning that letter over in my mind, and Daniel's voice, and the strange implication that some ancient manuscript, one supposedly forbidden, was somehow tied to my quiet corner of the world. The hills outside my window seemed darker than usual, as if they were listening. The next day, I drove to Daniel's childhood home, a worn white farmhouse about 40 minutes from town. It sat on a sloping hill that overlooked a valley covered in bare November trees. A thin fog curled between the trunks like smoke rising from an unseen fire. His truck was parked out front. But Daniel wasn't inside. The house was unlocked. His backpack lay open on the table, filled with notes written in Greek, Hebrew, and a language I didn't recognize. His laptop was still on, a document open on the screen. Just one sentence. The book is older than the covenant. I felt a coldness slide through me, the kind that doesn't come from weather. I searched the house, calling his name, but found nothing except a scattering of pages, drawings of symbols that looked like intertwining spirals, and one phrase repeated on several sheets. Do not read the opening line. That was when I felt it. A presence. Not a person, nothing so tangible. But something watching. Waiting. I backed out of the house slowly, feeling like I'd stepped into the shadow of something vast and ancient. Something patient. When I stepped onto the front porch, I noticed footprints in the frost. Not Daniel's. Smaller. Barefoot. Leading away from the house toward the tree line. And lying on the porch was another envelope. Identical parchment. Same handwriting. This one read. If you want to save him, come alone. No directions. No signature. No explanation. But I didn't need any. The footprints led into the woods, toward old trails I hadn't walked since childhood, trails my grandmother used to warn me about. There are things in those hills, she used to say, that remember when people feared the dark more than they feared each other. I used to think she was being dramatic. But as I stepped into those woods, following the delicate imprints in the frosted earth, I felt every story she ever told me press close. I walked for nearly an hour. The forest grew thicker, older, the trees twisting in shapes that looked almost human. The trail narrowed until it became little more than a suggestion on the ground. And then, in a hollow between two towering oaks, I saw it. A small stone cabin, one I remembered from childhood legends. The kind kids dared each other to approach. They said a monk once lived there, long before the town existed, copying forbidden texts smuggled from distant lands. They said he was found dead at his desk, his eyes turned completely black, his fingers burned to ash. Whether any of that was true, I never knew. But the cabin was real. And its door was open. Inside, the air was warmer than it should have been. The walls were lined with shelves, most empty, some holding scraps of parchment or clay vials filled with dust. But at the center of the room stood a table hewn from dark timber. And on that table lay a book. Not a modern book. Not even a medieval one. It was bound in something that looked like leather but shimmered faintly, like skin caught in moonlight. Its edges were sealed with a wax-like substance that pulsed softly, as though it had a heartbeat. For a long moment, I stood still. I could almost hear the thing breathing. Then I heard movement behind me. Soft. Careful. Human. When I turned, I saw a boy, no older than 10, standing in the doorway. Barefoot. Pale. His eyes too dark for the little light in the cabin. Are you Elias? He asked. My throat tightened. Yes. He nodded, stepping inside. Then the book wanted you to find it. I swallowed hard, glancing toward it. Where is my friend? The boy's expression didn't change. He opened the first line. A quiet dread rolled through me. What happens when someone reads it? I asked. They don't read it, the boy replied softly. It reads them. I took a slow step toward him. Where is Daniel now? The boy lifted a hand and pointed toward a door in the back wall I hadn't noticed before. It was smaller than a normal door, made of the same dark wood as the table. Carved into its surface was that same spiral symbol from Daniel's notes, shifting slightly, as though alive. He's below, the boy said. Alive? For now. I moved toward the door. But as my hand touched the handle, the boy spoke again, voice low. "If you go down there, you'll hear it. The book's voice. Don't listen to it. Whatever it tells you, don't answer." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because fear has strange ways of escaping the body. "You're telling me a book can speak?" He blinked slowly. "It doesn't speak with sound." Something cold prickled along my spine. "What are you?" I whispered. The boy tilted his head, like he was considering the question. Then he said, "I'm the one who brings the warnings." Before I could ask more, he stepped backward into the doorway and vanished into the dark outside, gone so quickly it was as if he dissolved into the trees. The silence he left behind felt thick and oppressive. After a moment, I pushed open the small wooden door. A narrow staircase descended into the earth, lit by faint blue lanterns that gave off no heat. The air grew cold as I moved downward, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The tunnel at the bottom was carved from bedrock, smooth and strangely symmetrical. This wasn't the work of frontier settlers or wandering monks. This felt older. Far older. As I walked, that cold tug beneath my ribs grew stronger, like someone was pulling a string tied to my spine, guiding me forward. I wasn't sure whether it was the book or something else. Finally, the tunnel opened into a chamber. A circular room, walls covered in carvings of names, thousands of them, etched in dozens of languages spanning millennia. Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Akkadian, Latin, and others I couldn't identify. In the center of the chamber knelt Daniel. His hands were clasped around his head. His eyes were shut tight. He rocked back and forth like someone listening to a sound no one else could hear. I rushed to him and dropped to my knees. "Daniel, Daniel, it's me." His eyes snapped open, and I wished to God they hadn't. The pupils were dilated into black voids. His lips trembled. His voice was little more than a breath. "It knows you're here." I gripped his shoulders. "What happened?" "The book," he whispered. "I didn't read it. I swear I didn't." The seal broke on its own. The words, they moved. They rewrote themselves. And then it. He gagged, doubling over in pain. "What did you see?" I demanded. He stared at the far wall, eyes wide with terror. "My name," he whispered. I looked at the carvings. Thousands of etched names covered the stone, glowing faintly. Then I saw it. Near the bottom, freshly carved, so fresh the dust still clung to the grooves, was Daniel's name. "Why is your name here?" I asked, voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just stared at me with those dark, hollow eyes. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Elias, your name is forming too." I turned back to the wall. At first, I saw nothing, just stone and carvings. But then, faint as a shadow, I saw lines beginning to take shape. Curving. Forming letters. My letters. E. L. I. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. "Daniel, we need to leave. Now." But he shook his head. "It doesn't let you leave once it knows you. It wants something. It always wants something." "What? What does it want?" He shuddered, as if the answer hurt him. "A witness," he said. "Someone to carry its words." I grabbed his arm. "Then we destroy it." He looked at me with something like pity. "You can't destroy something that was already forbidden before humanity learned how to write." Before I could respond, a sound filled the chamber. Not a sound heard with ears, more like a pressure behind the eyes, a vibration that rattled the bones. Daniel clutched his skull and screamed. The lanterns flickered. I felt something pressing at the edges of my mind, cold, ancient, probing. A voice without sound. A presence without form. A question without words. And God help me. I almost answered it. I bit down, hard, on my tongue until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The pressure receded slightly, as if surprised. Then the chamber shook. Carvings began to glow brighter. Dust rained from the ceiling. And Daniel collapsed against me, gasping. "It's waking," he choked. The seal kept it dormant. But someone broke it. Someone called it. And now it wants. The rest of his sentence dissolved into a violent tremor as he convulsed in my arms. I dragged him toward the tunnel, my pulse hammering. Behind us, the walls pulsed with light, every name glowing as though alive. The pressure grew stronger, pushing against the inside of my skull. As we reached the tunnel, Daniel whispered something so softly I barely heard it. "You can't run from something that knows your name." But I didn't stop running. I half carried, half dragged him up the stairs. When we reached the cabin, the boy was gone, the door swinging in the wind. The book still sat on the table, unbroken now, as if it had never been opened. But the heartbeat beneath its cover had grown louder. Human loud. I pulled Daniel outside just as a low hum filled the air, building, rising. The cabin windows shook. The earth vibrated beneath our feet. Daniel let out a broken sob. "It's calling you now." I looked over my shoulder. The book's cover began to crack. Light spilled through the fractures, white, blinding, pulsing like something trying to be born. And then it spoke. Not with a voice. Not with sound. With understanding. And I felt its words slide into my mind like a blade wrapped in silk. "You have been chosen to see what others feared to read." The ground shook violently. Trees bent. Birds fled in a frenzy. I clutched Daniel, trying to pull him farther from the cabin, but he held on to me, nails digging into my arm. "Don't look at it," he gasped. "Don't listen. Don't." His words cut off as a force slammed into us like a wave of invisible wind. We were thrown several feet across the clearing. Daniel didn't move. When I pushed myself up, dazed, I saw the cabin begin to collapse inward, wood splintering, stone crumbling, as though pulled by a gravity centered on the book. Then everything went still. Silent. The book rested atop the rubble, untouched, unburned, glowing faintly. Waiting. Waiting for me. I staggered backward, breath ragged. Daniel lay motionless beside me. I felt for a pulse. Weak, but present. At least he was still alive. For now. I looked once more at the book. And in that moment, God forgive me, I felt it looking back. Not at my body. Not at my face. At my name. A cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't the end. This was the invitation. I don't remember how long I knelt beside Daniel in that clearing. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. The air felt thicker than before, as if the world itself was holding its breath. You never realize how loud the forest is, birds, wind, insects, until that noise suddenly disappears. I kept my hand on Daniel's chest, feeling that thin, fluttering pulse. He was alive. Barely. His eyes stayed shut, though his body twitched every now and then, like someone trapped inside a nightmare they couldn't climb out of. I looked back toward the ruin of the cabin. The book glowed faintly on top of the rubble, a white pulse like the beat of a living heart. Every time it throbbed, I felt pressure behind my eyes, subtle but insistent, like something tapping on the inside of my skull, waiting to be let in. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. "I'm not your keeper," I whispered toward it. "I'm not the one you want." But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew the truth. That book had chosen me long before I ever walked into those woods. A gust of cold wind swept the clearing, and the glow of the book dimmed. Not gone, just patient. I lifted Daniel with as much care as I could and half carried him back along the narrow trail. He drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering things I couldn't make sense of, names, languages, snatches of sentences that made my skin crawl. At one point he said, "It remembers you," and I had to stop walking just to steady myself. I wanted to believe he was delirious. But deep down, I knew he wasn't. By the time we reached his truck, the sun had begun to set. The sky burned orange behind the jagged silhouettes of the trees, and the cold sharpened like a blade. I laid Daniel across the passenger seat. His breathing was shallow but steadier than before. "We're getting you to a hospital," I told him, even though I doubted he could hear. As I shut the door, something caught my eye in the reflection of the truck window. A shape. Standing at the edge of the forest. I turned, and saw the boy again. Still barefoot. Still pale. His black eyes watching with an unreadable expression. "You shouldn't have gone down there," he said softly. Anger rose through the fear. "Where were you? You said you give warnings, why didn't you warn us what was happening in that chamber?" He tilted his head. "Warnings aren't meant to save people. They're meant to prepare them." I took a step toward him. "What does it want? Why pick me? Why any of this?" The boy blinked, slow and deliberate. "The book doesn't choose because it wants something. It chooses because it reflects." "Reflects what?" He looked at me almost, sadly. "What's already inside you?" A chill ran down my spine. "Tell me what that means." But he shook his head. "You'll understand soon." I moved toward him again, but in the blink of an eye, literally, he was gone. No footsteps. No rustle of leaves. Just absence, as though he'd never stood there. I swallowed the dread rising in my throat and climbed into the driver's seat. The moment I turned the key, the truck's radio crackled to life, though it wasn't tuned to any station. Static filled the cab, then a faint whisper threaded through it. Not a human whisper. Something colder. "Elias." The sound of my name nearly made me swerve off the road. I shut the radio off. The static continued. So I ripped the entire power cord from the console. Silence. But for the rest of the drive, I felt eyes on the back of my skull, like a hand brushing the edges of my thoughts. At the hospital, doctors rushed Daniel into a room. They asked questions: what had happened, had he taken anything, had he fallen, but what could I tell them? "Oh yes, doctor," he read the first line of an ancient forbidden text that rewrites itself and speaks without sound. "Right. Truth would get us both locked in a psychiatric ward." So I said, "He collapsed while we were hiking. I don't know what caused it." The doctors believed me or pretended to, which was enough. I sat in the hallway outside his room, my nerves frayed. My fingers kept brushing the inside of my jacket pocket, where I'd placed the first letter. The parchment felt warm. No, not warm. Alive. I removed it quickly, holding it away from me. The letters looked darker than before, as though written freshly in ink that hadn't dried. I folded it again, trying to ignore the dread crawling beneath my ribs. When the doctor came out, he said Daniel was stable, but unresponsive. "His brain activity is abnormal," the doctor explained. "Like he's listening to something that isn't there." My stomach twisted. "Oh," I murmured. "He is." The doctor frowned. "What?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just thinking out loud." He left me with a sympathetic pat on the shoulder, like he believed I was in shock. Maybe I was. A few hours passed. The hospital lights dimmed. The hallway emptied. The fluorescent hum faded into a distant ringing in my skull. That was when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Coming from Daniel's room. I stood and pressed my ear to the door. Tap. 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 I opened it. Daniel lay motionless, just as before. But his right hand, his limp, pale hand, was tapping against the metal railing of the hospital bed. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. Morse code. Daniel loved Morse code. He'd once joked that he could communicate with me from beyond the grave using it. I swallowed the lump in my throat and leaned closer. Tap. 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 3 short taps. S. Pause. Tap. 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 S again. Pause. Then 1 long tap. T. S. S. T. But that didn't make sense. Not as a word, not as an abbreviation. Unless it wasn't a message. But a name. A name beginning to form. A name being carved somewhere in stone. A name that started with S. My blood ran cold. The tapping stopped. Daniel's breathing steadied. I backed away from the bed, heart hammering, when the lights flickered. Then, for just a moment, every monitor in the room, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen, every single one displayed a single word. Below. I stumbled backward. In that same instant, the power snapped back to normal. The monitors returned to their readings. The light steadied. No one else had seen it. Only me. Of course. I grabbed my coat and left the room, not running, exactly, but close enough. I drove straight home, locking every door behind me. The house felt different. Or maybe I did. Either way, something was wrong with the air, too still, too aware. Around midnight, I sat at the kitchen table and tried to steady my nerves with a cup of coffee. My hands shook so badly that half the cup ended up on the table. I wiped it away, muttering curses under my breath. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. From an unknown number. Just 1 line. The second seal breaks tonight. I dropped the phone. I didn't want to pick it up again, but ignoring the message didn't stop the dread from clawing at me. My mind raced. What seal? What does that mean? What happens when it breaks? How many seals are there? I didn't want the answers, but the truth was already pulling me toward the woods like a tide. Around 2 a.m., I forced myself into bed, telling myself exhaustion was exaggerating everything. But sleep didn't come. My thoughts were too loud. And then I heard it. A soft creak from my living room, like someone stepping on an old wooden floorboard. My breath froze. Another step. And another. Slow. Unhurried. Intentional. I reached for the lamp beside my bed, but before I could turn it on, a voice drifted from the darkness. Elias. Not the book. Not Daniel. A child's voice. I knew it before I saw him. The boy stood in the doorway, eyes coal-black, his face expressionless. You shouldn't be here, I whispered. I warned you, he said softly. But you keep walking toward it. I didn't walk toward anything, I snapped. It dragged me in. He took a step closer. No. It called you. And you answered. Why me? I demanded. Why not someone else? He paused. Then spoke the truth I'd been avoiding. Because you carry questions strong enough to open doors that should stay closed. That hit harder than I expected. I'd always been a seeker, of knowledge, of meaning, of the threads between history and faith. But I never imagined that curiosity could be dangerous. Not like this. Sit, the boy said. I didn't want to, but I obeyed. He sat across from me on the edge of the bed. His posture was rigid, unnatural. The book is not evil, he said. It is not good. It simply reveals. Reveals what? What you fear most, he whispered. What you believe least. And what you cannot escape. I swallowed. Is that what it did to Daniel? A faint nod. Daniel saw the truth that was waiting for him. What truth? That the first line he read was his own. My breath hitched. His own what? His own ending. I felt sick. The boy leaned closer, his voice dropping. And when the book shows you your ending, you do not walk away unchanged. My throat tightened. What did it show me? I whispered. You haven't seen it yet. A pause. But you will. A cold dread spread through me. I could barely make my voice work. What is the second seal? The boy looked toward the window, which now glowed faintly with moonlight. You'll know when it breaks, he said. Because the book will no longer whisper. He turned back to me. And will begin to answer. A gust of wind slammed against the house, rattling the windows. The boy stood abruptly. It's starting, he whispered. I have to go. Wait, are you trying to help me or not? His expression softened, almost human. I am what remains of those the book chose before you. My heart lurched. You were a keeper. He nodded once. A long time ago. What happened to you? He blinked slowly. I answered it. Then he stepped backward. And vanished. Just gone. The room felt colder the moment he left. The kind of cold that sinks into bone. And then. A sound echoed from outside. Not a voice. Not a whisper. A crack. Sharp. Final. Like something ancient breaking open. The second seal. I moved to the window. The woods behind my house pulsed with faint white light. The same glow the book gave off. The air vibrated. And then. My phone buzzed again. A text. This time, not from an unknown number. From my own number. The message read. Come below. As I stared at those words, something shifted in the shadows behind me. I turned slowly. And saw it. A word. Carved into my living room wall. Fresh. Dripping. A single name. Elias. I stumbled backward, breath ripping from my lungs. The letters glowed faintly, like they were still being written by invisible hands. And suddenly I understood. My name was no longer forming in the chamber below. It was forming everywhere. In stone. In air. In whatever realm the book touched. And there was no outrunning a thing that wrote your name. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was instinct. But something in me knew. The only way to stop this was to confront it. To face whatever waited beneath those woods. The night swallowed me as I walked toward the trees, the cold biting into my skin. The ground seemed to hum beneath my feet, guiding me. When I reached the ruins of the cabin, the book was no longer lying in the rubble. It stood upright. Open. Its pages glowing with a light that wasn't light at all. A whisper drifted toward me, not spoken, not heard. Recognized. Elias. My pulse pounded so hard I felt it in my teeth. I should have run. I should have prayed. But instead. I stepped closer. The pages shifted. Revealing words I couldn't understand. Until they began to rearrange. Slowly. Deliberately. Forming a sentence just for me. Come to the chamber. Your line must be written. I closed my eyes. I won't read it, I whispered. The pages trembled. And the book answered. Then it will read you. The forest shook. The earth cracked. The entrance to the tunnel below split open wider than before, an invitation carved from stone and darkness. I looked down into that abyss. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't a story about a forbidden book. It was a story about the cost of knowing. About the price of questions. And I had already paid too much to turn back. So I stepped into the darkness. And the darkness closed behind me.